she could decide, listen, I have this power. I don't have to deal with Congress. I don't have to deal with agencies. I don't have to deal with states. I don't have to deal with lawsuits. I have this power. I'm going to use it in a way to administer some fairness and justice in a deeply flawed criminal justice system at the federal level, because I can do it. And I know a lot about it, having been a previous prosecutor. Part of the reason for the book is to have that conversation. That could happen.
So joining me now on Open Book is Kimberly Whaley. She's a former assistant U.S. attorney, legal expert for CBS. She's a constitutional scholar and professor of law at the University of Baltimore. But the title of the book is Pardon Power: How the Pardon System Works and Why, which is very timely, I might say, Professor Kim. It's great to have you on. Obviously, I'm a big fan of you and your previous books, but for our listeners, provide some context. Give us a little bit about your background, how you got to become a professor, and then we'll get right into the book.
Yeah, so I practiced both, as you mentioned, as an assistant U.S. attorney. I was also a lawyer and associate independent counsel in the Whitewater investigation, investigating the Clinton family under the late Kenneth Starr. And after several years, I ended up with having 4 children and transitioned into a legal academic world. And when Donald Trump took office, I mean, I've been writing in scholarly journals, et cetera. When Donald Trump took office, I was reading the New York Times on a Sunday, and there was a statement in the New York Times that said the pardon power is absolute and there are no limits on it. And I know you're been to law school. I was like, no, that can't be right. It depends. It's always balancing against other limitations. So I wrote my first op-ed for the Baltimore Sun, and that just kind of snowballed into more opinion editorials. I now write for The Atlantic and Politico and Bulwark, hundreds of them at this point, radio. And then CBS heard me on the radio, and then CNN heard that, and MSNBC. And now I'm actually, for the last couple of years, been with ABC, but it's all around civic education and breaking down these concepts into English. And it's produced also now the 4th book. I was writing a scholarly book for Cambridge and realized the audience was different. And that was How to Read the Constitution and Why. HarperCollins took it in 24 hours when they got the proposal. I think understanding there's a real problem here. We don't know how the car works. We can't exactly fix it. And then there was a book on voting. My 3rd one was on problem solving like a lawyer, which sounds like an oxymoron, but you have to understand your opponent's point of view. You have to be ready to compromise. You have to take into account the policy or the value system behind the law, all of those things that we don't do in regular parlance. And then this last book, it's a different publisher, but they approached me for this. So, another installation in the And Why series, not the how-to books, the why-to books. And the pardon power, I don't know if you agree, is kind of at the center of the storm. I mean, we can't dodge it in the next 6 months, whether we like it or not. And it's a disturbing remnant of a monarchy that really, in my view, has no place in American law, at least as it's currently functioning at the federal level.
Well, I think it's been corrupted, by the way, but we'll talk about that in a second. Let me just step back, and I want to get your reaction because I'm fascinated by this. So I've read the book and enjoyed the book. And I want to go back to Julius Caesar for a second, because Caesar comes into Rome. He crosses the Rubicon. He takes over. He becomes an absolutist. He becomes a dictator or monarch or somebody that has absolute power. He's above the state. And he starts offering out pardons to his adversaries. And so this has been a political device for several millennia. It's a device to bring people together that are sometimes at war. This is the device that, Lincoln said he didn't have to use it, but he effectively was using it at the end of the Civil War, pardoning generals and other people, try to get the Union back together. So there is usefulness to the pardon power. And so I want to ask you the following question, and then I'm going to I'm reading your book, and my reaction to your book is, well, there are usefulnesses. There's a reason why this idea evolves from monarchy or from Caesar, deployed by other successful statesmen, but it's now been corrupted.
I think that's right. Yeah.
And so Donald Trump has corrupted it. And so I'm just wondering if it needs certain checks and balances like everything else does, where okay, you can't just whimsically, you have this absolute pardonability, which if you get it in the hands of the wrong person, it becomes very, very dangerous. And so, what's your reaction to all that?
Well, I think two parts. Yes, I agree with you that, I mean, it goes back to the Code of Hammurabi. You know, it's in
Mm-hmm.
every country in the world except China. So there's something foundational about government, about justice, maybe. I mean, in common law England, it came on the scene in the 7th century, and there wasn't a jury trials until the 13th century. And there were a lot of death penalties for, sentences for low level crimes, and a lot of justice was kind of retaliatory between private warring factions, and the king came in to administer justice in certain circumstances to the worthy. And that still is the concept, I think, that we hold on to as positive. But since Reagan, with the exception of Biden and Obama, every president, including Clinton, have run on this tough on crime stance. We spend approximately $8 billion in taxpayer money a year to imprison people, and there's no mechanism to get, since there's been no parole at the federal level since the 1980s, there's no mechanism to adjust for, false positives, for keeping people that are innocent in jail or keeping people in there for a long period. So in theory, Kamala Harris, if she were to win, I don't know, end up in the White House in January, and I say win in quotes because I think we're going to have a debate over that falsely, she could decide, listen, I have this power. I don't have to deal with Congress. I don't have to deal with agencies. I don't have to deal with states. I don't have to deal with lawsuits. I have this power. I'm going to use it in a way to administer some fairness and justice in a deeply flawed criminal justice system at the federal level, because I can do it. And I know a lot about it, having been a previous prosecutor. Part of the reason for the book is to have that conversation. That could happen, but that's not what's happened. Barack Obama had a kind of a minor or a limited commutation policy I think 2013, 2014, involving low-level drug offenses. So it's happened, but not on a meta level. And on the meta level, as we saw in the last administration, and it wasn't just Donald Trump, but he took it to a pardon palooza level, like, real corruption. It's pay for play. It's, this avalanche of pardon requests. Rudy Giuliani peddling them for $2 million a pop, 6 members of the United States Congress seeking pardons for January 6th, pardoning Paul Manafort, pardoning Roger Stone, who the judge raised eyebrows at in a hearing around that pardon, because it was ostensibly to keep these people silent in connection with investigation into the president's own wrongdoing. And then I hope we can talk about it. We have the Supreme Court coming in and manufacturing criminal immunity for presidents if they use official power. And if they're going to do that, they're going to need people to execute their orders. How do you do that? You pardon them. So the pardon power has now, based on that decision, it is now a green light for not only extraordinary corruption, but a crime gang in the White House. And it's been insulated throughout this mythology of pardons being unlimited, plus this ridiculous immunity decision. So I agree with you in theory. I just think it's gone off the deep end in the other direction. And we've only seen how nefarious it can be thanks to our friends in the majority on the Supreme Court.
Okay, so I have a theory that I want to test on you, and it's a pretty bold-faced theory. So, I know we're in this culture now where you have to be very sensitive, but I'm not that sensitive. So I have a theory that whites are threatened by black and brown people, and at least a group of whites are. And I have a theory that the democracy works as long as the white people are in charge. But if the demography is such where black and brown people are going to be the majority of the demography, and therefore they will end up running the government, well, then that's not good. Let's switch the rules of government and let's keep the white people in charge. And so there's a group of them. I think Donald Trump represents them, frankly, if I could be bold enough to say that to you. And so now we're watching the scissors come out and we're cutting things a certain way so that they're manufactured a certain way. This immunity case, as an example, is an example of that in my mind. So what have I gotten wrong? Tell me I'm completely wrong, and tell me that I'm living in a reality distortion of my own mind.
I wouldn't say either of those things. The only thing I would do is I would add, I don't think it's just black and brown people. I think it's women too. I mean,
Women too. Yep.
at the
Yeah, but I'm
time,
sorry. Black, brown, and women.
right?
So Kamala Harris represents the threat of all. Kamala Harris. I want to make sure I pronounce her name right and give her the dignity she deserves. She represents a direct threat, and I think I should point out that I have endorsed her for president, and I've worked for her. I've been in the spin room for her in the debate, and I'm doing some debate prep with her. She's going to debate Trump again, is my prediction. But I don't know. Am I okay? So I interrupted.
Okay,
Okay, you
so
said it's not just black and brown people; it's women, and then continue. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
so I mean, I, I have two answers. One is from the demographic. You're right. I mean, the last statistic I checked, people under the age of 16 are primarily black and brown. So just literally the generations coming through, the numbers are such that it's not going to be white and it's not going to be male. Now, as far as, okay, so is there a backlash? Is there a reaction to this? Not only in the representations of the two presidential candidates coming November, but we have the United States Supreme Court again reversing Roe versus Wade, which is putting women's basic health care, emergent access to emergency room care is being denied by virtue of an immutable characteristic of birth, that is having a uterus, which to me is counterintuitive to anything around liberty, justice for all. And then you have the Supreme Court's basically declaring affirmative action unconstitutional. And in that decision, I mean, people talk about and can debate whether affirmative action is helpful or harmful for traditional minorities in the academic field. But if you read that decision, Anthony, the court declared the Constitution colorblind. The court rewrote Section 14 of the Constitution, which was enacted following the Civil War to bring black and brown people who had been enslaved into the Union as human beings. And the court has now declared any interpretation of that takes into account addressing past discrimination or tries to put people closer to the same starting line as white males with money. No offense to you. We're the only ones who had any agency at the time of ratification of the Constitution. The court has now said interpreting equal protection in a way that's about remedying past discrimination is now unconstitutional. Unconstitutional. I think we're going to see, and I've written a whole law review article on it in the University of Maryland Law Review this spring. I think we're going to see a cascade of the Supreme Court rolling back civil rights protection. So this isn't just, it's a metaphorical, theoretical, spiritual, symbolic thing that's happening with Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. True. It's also literally happening in this packed Supreme Court, thanks to another white male, Mitch McConnell, who in a Machiavellian way managed to essentially lock down the United States Supreme Court for generations, to your point, because they are not having to respond to voters. When these black and brown kids become voting age, they can't do anything about the Supreme Court. It's anti-democratic. So if what you can't do with the ballot box, yeah, they're doing it by changing the system. And it's at every level. I mean, we could talk for hours about it. I don't want people to get terrified around it. It can be addressed, but it can't be addressed if people don't even know what's going on.
Well, I'm going to blame one other person, if you don't mind, and he's deceased now, and I liked him, but it's Harry Reid, because just for the constitutional historians here or the Senate process people, he gave up the filibuster move, and McConnell told him, if you do that, you're going to regret it. And he did it anyway, and McConnell ended up using it against the Democrats and getting these nominations through without a 2/3 vote, as they once used to go through at. So,
right, he did it for the lower federal judges, and then McConnell said, yep, fine, I'll do it for the Supreme Court justices. But I would add, to a living person, Barack Obama didn't really even make a speech when McConnell stole Merrick Garland's seat. So the Democrats were behind the ball on this and didn't push back. And I'm on record as having, assigned that criticism. They could have played hardball, I think, but at least. Well,
listen, McConnell was incredibly hypocritical, because he had the Garland nomination. It was 6 months prior to the election. He said that we needed to wait, and then a few weeks prior to the election, he's got Justice, I guess her name
Barrett,
is
yeah.
Barrett, I guess Amy Barrett. She comes in a few weeks before, and so it's the height of hypocrisy, and it creates all this cynicism in the American body politic. But I want to go to this if you don't mind, because it's embedded in the pardoning aspect. You're writing this book, at least the way I saw it. You're writing the book to explain that there's worthiness to pardon power, but it becomes unworthy if you're going to corrupt it or put it in the hands of very bad people. And so therefore the process has been in fact corruptive. And so what do I have wrong? Is that fair? Is that a fair assessment of your book?
Yeah, I think that the pushback would be, well, the framers did it, right? The framers put into the Constitution, Article 2, a pardon power without a lot of restraints. But they also kind of thought it would only be white males that they know that would be in charge. And I also argue that the Supreme Court and the public, frankly, and even legal scholars have somehow allowed the pardon power to have a mythology around it that it doesn't have limits when any other power, the commander in chief power, has limits. The power to execute the law has limits. The power to make treaties has limits. Everything else that is supposed to be core power has limits. But even in the immunity case, counsel for the government, for Jack Smith, didn't push back at the conservative justices' statements that the pardon power would be a core power for which the president could commit crimes with impunity. So you're right that my argument is does more harm than good. It's not doing the good that it could do. But I also argue that part of that is the mythology again around this as somehow being a relic of King George III, whose pardon power was constrained at the time of the ratification of the Constitution. He shared it with the church. Parliament had pulled back on it. So my argument is it needs serious attention, and all power has to be checked by other branches, all of it. So it's, okay, what can we do short of a constitutional amendment? And I make arguments for what can be done, but the threshold thing is we have to stop ignoring it because it's now become a real monster, to your point, if it's in the wrong hands, it not only could be corrupt as to individuals, but it could be used to use the massive power of the presidency and now this official power to commit some serious crimes, because you can immunize your deputies now using the pardon power and they wouldn't be covered under immunity.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because Nixon, whatever we both think of Richard Nixon, he did believe in the Constitution and he believed in the process. I mean, he could have been Trumpian, pardoned himself and pardoned his people around him, but he complied to the checks and balances in the system. And so you now have to wonder how we made it 250 years without having a rogue player come in that was morally bereft and that would take the system and use the system to their advantage as opposed to respecting the system. But I want to talk about Justice Roberts for a second, if you don't mind, because I followed his career with some level of admiration, and I'll give an example of this. He wrote the opinion on Obamacare. Whatever you think of Obamacare, whether it's should be or shouldn't be, what he did not want the court to do was to come into the political process. You had the executive branch and the legislative branch that voted it in. And so he wrote the case to treat it as a tax. And therefore, if it's a tax, it would fit and conform to certain things. And it was a little bit of a manifestation on his part. But I think it got to the point that I think he wanted, at least at that time, 10 or 12 years ago, to depoliticize the court and to maintain the integrity of the court. We now fast forward, it's 12 years later, he doesn't seem to be doing that anymore. And I'm wondering, as a constitutional scholar and a professor, if you could opine on that. Am I wrong about that? And if I'm right about that, then what's changed about the court and what's changed about Justice Roberts?
You're not wrong about that. I just want to make one note on your last comment about Nixon and a plug for the book. As you know, John Dean, Nixon's White House counsel, who famously said there's a cancer on the White House, wrote the foreword to my book. I was just on a panel with him in the 50-year anniversary of Ford and the pardon at the University of Michigan. He says the difference between Donald Trump and Richard Nixon is Richard Nixon had a conscience. So and that everything Nixon did would now be protected. There would be no criminal liability. There would be no Watergate. There would be no resignation. There would be none of that because it's now all immunized. So we have seen over the last summer a change in the trajectory of constitutional law. I mean, we have a witness to it say it would have been completely different. I'm a lawyer. I've read the opinion. On Justice Roberts, yes. I mean, there was a front page article in the Sunday Times, New York Times, about how he wrested the opinion in the immunity case from Justice Alito, maybe because Justice Alito's wife and himself, it's his property, has stopped the steal signs now, made public that so maybe there was at least an appearance of conflict of interest. But he also wrote the decision in the Section 3 case, basically deactivating the 14th Amendment, which expressly says you've engaged in insurrection and rebellion. You can't hold office again if you've taken an oath. So this is an originalist, a textualist, someone who pretends to pay attention to the plain language of the law and the history and rationale behind it. It's both of those decisions are, and the Section 3 got a bigger majority. I mean, there were some concurring opinions, but it's not intellectually honest pursuant to their own jurisprudential philosophy. I mean, if you're a textualist, you're an originalist, fine. But then do that across the board. They're not. So I don't know. I've been asked this a few times. I think, he was in the White House, Brett Kavanaugh, who I knew in the Ken Starr investigation, excellent, brilliant lawyer, also worked for Bush. And it seems to be there was a deep, it's one of two things. It's either, or maybe both, a deep skepticism of prosecutors. The idea is, okay, now this has gone forward against Donald Trump. It's going to become a ping pong ball. These rogue, out of control prosecutors are now going to be indicting former presidents based on politics. The problem with that, of course, is there's a lot of checks and balances against limiting the excessive power of prosecutors, including grand juries, proof beyond a reasonable doubt, appeals, all kinds of things. The other alternative was they are political. That it's, heads we win, tails you lose. So this is a Republican president. We don't want to see Donald Trump indicted or constrained, or the Republican Party indicted or constrained. So we're going to say certain things are official, including relating to, January 6th. Those can't be prosecuted, but we're not going to do the same thing for unofficial acts. We're not going to draw any boundaries and say, this is definitely unofficial. So if you find anything that Donald Trump did that's unofficial under our definition, go for it, Jack Smith. They were, eerily silent on that topic, which to me suggests, Anthony, that there's some politics going on, that, that they might be biased and corrupted. And that's very disturbing as someone who has to persuade law students every year that this system is something we should have a lot of respect for.
Is there any going back, Professor?
On immunity?
Or any of it? Is there a re-engineering of the process? Is there a renewal, an American renewal that would sort of refortify the planks of the Constitution, provide some guardrails for the pardoning situation, and to, it's in the decision of the courts. You could, of course, legislate if you had the right legislature. The court's interpreting the law, right? But you could put law into place that redefines immunity, right?
Well, the question is, it comes back to the Supreme Court. So if Congress were to try to do that, they might say, no, you can't constrain the immunity because we've now declared it as a matter of the Constitution. I mean, as you know, when the court interprets the Constitution, it's like amending the Constitution. But that goes back to Marbury versus Madison, right? So they gave themselves that power in 1803 in that landmark case. And I know you're an optimist, and I like to be optimistic. I was at a presentation of a colleague of mine who's doing a lot of research into Justice Marshall when he was a lawyer, and all of those primarily African-American lawyers who were the masterminds behind Brown versus Board of Education and all of the innovation of the Warren Court, where we saw an expansion of rights, not a narrowing of rights. And he said, I asked him, I said, how did they do that? And can we do that today? And his answer was they did it not just by going to court. They did it by engaging with the communities So people were aware of the issues, understood what was coming up through the courts before they filed their lawsuits. So it was a multi-tiered approach to what they were fighting for. People had buy-in within the population that then somehow trickled into the court system and into the justices. These are human beings, these justices. We've seen justices over the years kind of shift in terms of their political leanings. We're already seeing it arguably with Justice Barrett. She filed a concurring opinion in the immunity case that could have been a dissent. She decided to call it a concurring opinion. So I think it's possible through the courts. I'm a big fan, and I've been out saying this. I think there needs to be a constitutional amendment, ideally, to put the Constitution back where it was in June prior to the immunity decision. I would add a right to vote. There's no affirmative right to vote in the Constitution. If that were there, which surprises people, I think the Supreme Court couldn't do as many shenanigans as they're doing. And I think we could be more express about you can't use pardons for corrupt purposes, whether it's for yourself or whether it's for your cronies. Congress on the pardon, though, could ban lobbying for pardons. They could say you can't do it. You can't sell pardons. You can't use your access to the White House and your promises of donations once the president finishes office or in their next campaign to get pardons for yourself or your friends. I mean, so there are things Congress can do. Congress could require a record of pardons, could say you got to put in writing who you talked to and why, a rationale for the pardon and why you turned down other applications. We don't have that. So there's lots of things we could do. But again, it's not going to happen if people just, reactively assume that it's a king-like power that's untouchable.
I want to ask you to react to one other thing, and then we'll get to the culmination of this. And I try to put this as delicately as possible, but it's not just Donald Trump, meaning that you could say, okay, Trump hijacked the Republican Party and all of this stuff got corrupted, but you can't get a Donald Trump unless it's bubbling up from somewhere, unless there's this discontent that has bubbled up. And it's now almost like a virus. It's infected a lot of different people, and a lot of people would righteously defend what's happening right now. And so I guess, I'm looking for, not saying that you have the answer, Kim, but I'm looking for, how would you defend? How would you rebut this? Like, let's say that I'm Vice President Harris as an example, what do I say about my use of pardon power? And what do I say about trying to redirect things back to something that was a little bit fairer, more system related and less personal? Because you know from the law, right? What did Cicero say? We are all slaves to the law in order to be free. We have to subordinate ourselves to the legal structure. Once a few of us become above the legal structure, then the whole trust in the system goes away. So role play for me. Be Vice President Harris. What would you like to, let's say she wins. What would you like to hear her say as president? What would you like to hear her do to try to get the system back in order? I feel like I'm a legal chiropractor and the spine is out of whack and we've got to crack it back into place. What would you like her to do?
Well, as you know, there's not a lot that a president can do to wave their magic wand. I think that's a mythology, but pardon, they could. I mean, she could say, listen, we're going to do DNA testing on everyone on death row in the federal system. And if there's exonerating evidence demonstrating that they didn't do it, we're not going to execute people. I mean, she could do that, right? So there's that with respect to specifically the pardon power. I said Obama did a review of low-level drug offenses that involve no violence, and that under the modern sentencing, they would have gotten a shorter sentence. And he pardoned or commuted, hundreds, well over 1,000 sentences. That's doable. Joe Biden pardoned people with low-level marijuana offenses. So there is good that could be done. George W. Bush, when he left office, was disillusioned with the pardon power because of all the lobbying for it at the end of each term, and said, president should announce a policy and stick to it. That's not Congress. That's a president doing that. You're closer to politics, so I don't know the complexities of doing something like that from a personal level. On the other thing, Anthony, so many people believe this. It's really mind blowing to watch that debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Um, and I mean, again, I have 4 kids. I watched it with my youngest, and that we are to understand how we can still be so split and divided as a country, and it being such a close race. I mean, not only in terms of, the corruption, the criminal indictments, the conviction, the hate, the cruelty he's exhibited, but also just the cognitive decline. I mean, you have to really wonder if he's even capable and competent. And I'm not a professional, mental health professional, but others have weighed in on this. And I have to wonder if it has to do with something maybe she could do something about, or at least spearhead or make it a priority, and that is misinformation and disinformation. I mean, at the time of Watergate, there was one set of facts. The Washington Post reported what the New York Times reported, what 60 Minutes reported, right? And the public turned on Nixon once the dirt came out, and it came out through the courts, which would probably now not happen given the immunity, and that is, his Oval Office tapes with all the crimes that were recorded on the Oval Office tapes. Now, each of us gets tailored information fed into our mini computers we hold in our hands using algorithms we don't understand that just reinforce what it believes our biases are. So I mean, when I was a kid, you'd go to the encyclopedia and the card catalog to learn information. Now we have way too much. And our kids don't know how to sort it, and we don't know how to sort it. We don't know how to teach them how to sort it. So, and the framers understood that, that kind of populism based on bad information was really dangerous. It's why we don't have just a direct democracy where we just vote for the laws we want. We have a representative democracy for that reason. And Madison said, point your Cicero, if men were angels, we would not need government. The idea being we have to constrain our worst instincts. And the way to do that is at the ballot box. But if people are being lied to and they don't know how to tell truth from lies, I don't know how we get around that. So I think we need Congress and we need a president to step in. We also have a mental health crisis, particularly with our young girls, to step in and do something about that cancer, which is not just domestic. It's Vladimir Putin. It's enemies across the globe. TikTok, Chinese. I don't know how we get around that without law. I really don't.
Well, I mean, it's very tough because we now have conspiracy theorists saying that ABC News corrupted the debate, and then you have billionaires piling on platforms like X saying that. I mean, geez, I don't know. I guess it's one of those weird things. So,
well, maybe AI will save us. I don't know what you think about that, but I know everybody's afraid of it. But I think it's not motivated by money and power.
Yeah, well, maybe I don't know. Let me ask you. I know we're running out of time, but I have 5 words that I'd like you to react to, like we did on my last podcast. Are you ready?
Yeah.
I say the word justice. You say what?
I say the Constitution, as originally understood, to limit the power of any one person in America.
Okay, I say the word democracy.
It's the inverted triangle. A monarchy, the king is at the top. You flip it, that's a democracy. The people are at the top, and the power trickles down to the president.
Okay, I say the word power.
Power is corrupting. If men were angels, we would not need government.
Okay, dictatorship.
It's a word we have to take very seriously, and that is the vision for America offered by the Republican Party, and we should call it like it is and debate it for what it is.
Okay, very well said. I say the word pardon.
Excusez-moi, I don't pardon my French. I'm worried about the pardon. Not so much if Kamala Harris gets in office, but I would say we are incarcerating thousands and thousands of people improperly. The racism endemic in our system is troubling. University of Michigan has a database on exonerations, which are judges coming in and saying somebody was wrongfully convicted. 50% of them are people of color, when 13.6 of the population involved are people of color. So pardon could be used for justice if there was a president with the courage to do it.
Well, phenomenal rendition. The title of the book from Professor Kim Whaley, the title, Pardon Power, How the Pardon System Works and Why. Thank you so much for joining us on Open. It's a phenomenal piece of technology, James. Everything has changed. Our phones have changed, our computer, the way we look at the TV. The book is a 500-year-old piece of technology. You think in 500 years it'll be with us, James?
I think so, and I think it's astonishing simply how extraordinarily durable it is and effective it is. And as you say, newspapers, we don't read them anymore. It's on your iPad, it's on your phone. Music, the format changes all the time, not with books. And I think when publishers also concentrate on the physical attributes of a book as well, they are lovely things and treasures forever.
Welcome to Open Book. And joining me today is James Daunt. He's the Chief Executive Officer at Barnes & Noble, which is an iconic American bookseller. He's also CEO of a stationary retailer, Paper Source, and of course, Waterstone. So the largest retail bookseller in the United Kingdom. And I have to tell you, the one on Piccadilly is probably my favorite, but I've been to several, James. And you are also the founder of the much-loved independent chain, Daunt Books. So great to have you on. By the way, sir, this is our 200th episode.
Goodness.
So you are coming on, James, right at our bicentennial, I guess you could call it. But you've had this unbelievable journey. So I want to start there. Take us back. What is your earliest relationship with books? For me, in the first grade, I won the book contest there were probably 150 kids in my first grade class. And I read the most books in a 3-month period of time. So that got me bugged up. What about you?
Yeah, probably about the same age, but also I'm a lot older than you, and I come from a world in which there weren't actually many bookstores, and certainly weren't in London, and middle-class people, of which I was definitely one, or born into a family of one. We went to the library. We went down to the public library, and we went once a week, and we collected a little stack of books, and steadily that stack got a bit taller and bigger, and lugged them home and read them and took them back the following week and swapped them out.
I love it. Your life in books, though, it was at a turning point for books, if you don't mind me saying so, because I feel like 2010 was a big moment. The iPad came in, and it sort of decentralized media. It made it less interesting, frankly, to take a book like this, put it in your hand, and read it. We were sort of fixated on social media and things like that. And so the bookstores were doing this, sir. Okay. And, you saw something. And, first of all, I want to thank you for revitalizing Barnes & Noble, because I have one down the block from me here in Manhasset, which I'm in every single week. And, I thought that place was going to be touch and go a few years ago. Borders Bookstore, we both remember that, James, went out of business. And so you saw something, in the book selling model, the hard book selling model at a brick and mortar shop. What was that? What did you see that you were able to cause this great revitalization in the UK and the United States?
Well, certainly my own experience of book selling, and I was, I had set up my own bookstore way back in 1990, so I had been doing it for a very long time. Amazon had come along, and I didn't notice. I was obviously aware of them. I saw quite a lot of change in my customers' behavior, but most of that was wholly positive for me. I no longer had to order in the technical books and the manuals, and I could change my stock to make it actually much more interesting, because Amazon was fulfilling all of those orders. But my sales kept on going up. So that's why I say I didn't really notice it. I only noticed it as a positive thing. But I also could see the chains who were overextended to a degree, and then they started doing completely endless initiatives which were making their businesses ever less effective and their bookstores ever less enjoyable, largely because they were cutting costs. They lost trust in what they were meant to be doing, which was presenting really good and enjoyable bookstores. And that cycle of cost-cutting and reduction in expertise and in reduction in enjoyment of their stores was leading them to, one after another to failure. And then ultimately, or the only person left in the United Kingdom was Waterstones, and they were going bankrupt.
So James, I think what I'm hearing from you is they got scared. They started trying things that caused a decline in customer attention, frankly, and store traffic. And your idea was get back to your brass tacks, get back to your roots, and do the things that got you to the dance in the first place. But that took guts, weirdly, didn't it? I mean, most people were going in a different direction. So, what were you thinking at the time? Give us some of the strategy.
Well, Waterstones, which was the Barnes & Noble equivalent in the United Kingdom, was in big trouble. They were literally going bankrupt. They were about to be closed. And that suddenly seemed a real shame. They had these great big stores everywhere in the nation. And, obviously if they went, I as an independent bookseller was going to have an easier time of it. I could open up a few more stores, but I certainly wasn't going to open up 300 stores. And lots of places that had nice, good bookshops would lose them. And that seemed regrettable, particularly as I thought it was totally unnecessary that they were doing the things that they had done to make their shops so unattractive and unappealing. And we just needed to reverse that and set out to do it. And very quickly found that our customers were enjoying us again and coming back into our stores.
Okay, so I'm an avid customer, so I'm going to say some things to you, and I want you to react to it. Okay, I feel like you changed the lighting in the stores, you changed the presentation, you opened a store in Bridgehampton for Barnes and Noble in a very fashionable shopping area out there, and when I walk into that Barnes and Noble, there's just it draws you in. The older stores almost had like fluorescent lighting in them. You also changed the wood on the bookshelves even.
Our job is to make physically appealing places, so they need to have nice, they need to be clean and they have clean floors, and of course it's much better if you light them properly and you generally make them attractive. Again, extremely important is then if you present everything that you're selling attractively. That's important. But most of all, it's that we have happy teams of booksellers in the stores engaging with their customers and applying proper and curated intelligence to how they're presenting their stores. And it's that last bit that I think we've really cracked. It's helpful that we've made a lot of them look a lot nicer, but we've also not changed in many stores, and we're doing very, very well in those because the booksellers are doing a better job.
It's an interesting thing in our time, if you don't mind me saying so, because our time is about algorithms. Our time is about instant gratification of touching something and a one click, if you will. But I feel people go to your stores. We'll talk about the Daunt bookstores in a second, where somebody gave me a gift certificate to your store. I was in London giving a speech, and the woman said, "I hear you like books. Here's a gift certificate." I went to one of your stores, and it was just loved it. I mean, it's just magnificent presentation in your store, but it's against the grain. Is the pendulum swinging back, James? I guess that's my real question. Is that even with my kids, they're off social media now. I feel like their personalities are coming back. Deirdre and I were like, "That's it. Give me the iPad." I feel like I've gotten them from the zombie zone. And I'm just wondering if Waterstones and Daunt Books and Barnes & Noble is a return to reality.
Yeah, I take a much more positive view, and I think that, yes, of course, people fall into their iPad and fall into their social media and fall into the rest. But we've always been doing some version of that. When I was a kid, I was accused of having square eyes because I watched TV for half an hour a day. This is always... We've always had these anxieties about our kids, but actually the reality is that people read with different levels of enthusiasm at different ages, and they come and it goes. But generally speaking, people are reading all the time and reading more. Whether they read in a bookstore depends entirely on the friendliness and availability of that bookstore. And we've found, dramatic increases in reading in the United States, even at the same time as everybody says it's all going to pot. It isn't.
Well, let me tell you something. I was super worried about it. I was like, how am I going to find? My thing is, I don't like the algorithm. I want to go into Waterstones, Daunt, Hatchards, and I want to walk the store because there's going to be a book in the store that I wouldn't have anticipated. And by the way, my algorithm wouldn't have anticipated that I necessarily want to buy, And so you've captured that. How'd you do that?
Well, the big insight that we had was to leave it to the store teams. And most retailers don't do that for obvious reasons. They want conformity. And if you walk into Zara, you want to find the same clothes. If you walk to H&M, you want this. And if you walk in, it's all around. It'd be very upsetting to walk into CVS and find they didn't sell toothpaste or shampoo. But with us, books are very, very different, and we can leave it to the individual store teams. And in so doing, make the job of being a bookseller dramatically more exciting and invigorating than it had been when they were given strict instructions as to what was on this table, and the best-selling book was going to be this, even though nobody wanted to buy it. So we've trusted the intelligence and enthusiasm of our booksellers, and most of our stores have got better. Not all of them. Some of them have got worse, but we're patient about that. And then we address the people who've got worse, not centrally from New York and somebody turning up and shouting at them, but saying the nearest store that gets it right, go and help them, sort them out, and having a patience to encourage that sort of diffusion and of skills. And the stores become better and our sales go up. Doesn't surprise me. And bookstores are lovely things. Bookstores are places that of every age people like to come into. Small babies like being in a bookstore. The oldest citizen does. Everybody in between. And we're safe spaces. We're places where all the kids can tumble into after school. It's a get out of jail card we give them, because when they go home, and they want to come into our stores because they want to lark around with their friends. But when they go home, they say, oh, I was in the bookstore. Parents are not going to be crossed.
You know, I watched your interview on Squawk Box it was about a month or so ago. And Andrew Sorkin, who's a friend of mine, who has done this program for 1929, his best-selling book, which your stores have frankly sold a lot of. I didn't realize this. You've crossed the 700 store threshold. And did you think that was going to happen? When you signed on for Barnes & Noble to take this over, did you think you'd be where you are right now a couple of years later?
I was hopeful. The reason I want to open up bookstores is, partly that vocational desire to put stores back into communities. Mainly it's to give my booksellers career opportunities. And if you've got a declining store base, then there isn't much prospect of getting advancement. When you've got an expanding one, particularly a rapidly expanding one, that's great. You're a young bookseller, you can see your career opportunities. That's why it's very important that it makes the business go well, pleases my owners, but I'm doing it for different reasons.
So I think you've done something too where, when I see the label Barnes & Noble exclusive or Waterstones exclusive, you've, there's a gravitron to that. I feel like people are like, yeah, I could buy it from Amazon, but I want to keep this community store open, or, even the independents, I think, are taking some elements of that. Tell us about how that relationship then now is with the publisher. So where's the balance of power now in the book selling community?
I think publishers are now highly appreciative of what we do. In the old days, they used to pay for placement. So they would give us lots and lots of dollars and we would pile up their books in a way that they instructed. And that was very helpful to them, obviously, for the predictability. We don't take a dime now, but we do sell far more books, and slightly unpredictably, and we don't send any books back or have any failures or less failures. So once they've figured that out, for publishers, good publishing gets rewarded much better. And ultimately that is better for them. The transition was a bit tricky. There was a transition when everyone thought, oh Lord, maybe this won't work. And we've thrown out the good and we haven't got anything back in return. But now they really do have it in return. So we work well with them. And of course, central to our mission is to develop careers of authors, and do well by authors, and ultimately that benefits publishers. But we're really focused on the author more than we are on the publisher.
I've heard you say this, as I've obviously listened to several of your interviews, that there may be too many books being published right at this moment. Do you believe that? And tell us why.
Far too many books, and it's getting ever worse. And this is speaking as a bookseller who crafts a physical space. So I only have so much space, and there's more and more, and lots of self-publishing. Nothing wrong with, writing a book and wanting to see it out in the world. But for myself, I have to curate all the time. And the bit that I regret is that people get upset with me for not carrying their book. Well, I just can't. I don't have the space for it. And that's really what I mean. The fact that they sell on Kindle or they sell on Nook or online is fine by me. I want people reading, but I myself have to curate. And the reality is that I can't take the vast majority of books that are published.
Right. Interesting. And you also said something I thought was also interesting, which would change the industry, is that some books should just go straight to the trade paperback. What sorts of books would you recommend to a publisher? If you were running a publishing house, what sort of books would go straight to trade paperback?
Well, I think around the hardcover and the hardcover market, there is a certain gravitas to it. There's also obviously fame or celebrity attached to it as well. But for a long time, it was felt that you had to put something in hardcover. And if there wasn't a market there, it would be much better to put it in softcover. Typically in the fiction genres, that's particularly applicable. It makes our life easier also to concentrate on the hardcovers that we want to sell. When there's too much, it becomes too crowded. It's difficult for us. And we always have to curate, and we always have to select. But again, I don't mind if they publish them. I'm just telling them, I'm not going to take it in my stores because you're crowding out the books that I do want to sell.
Makes sense. I started this podcast because I'm a book lover. This was a labor of love for me. I've interviewed people like Daniel Silva and Brad Thor and Ken Follett and Chris Miller, all these, and it gives me an opportunity because I actually read the book. So I show up having read the book, and it gives me an opportunity. I feel like authors, to me, have a special place in our culture because if they've spent 6 months or a year researching, working on something, character development. When you and I were kids, I used to say, for $10 and 10 hours, you can get 10 years of somebody's life experience in a book. What could be more enjoyable? I mean, it's probably 25 pounds now or $30, but it's still, for me, price per square inch is such a great buy, and it's such a great intellectual advantage for people. But is it different on the other side of the Atlantic? How would you compare the UK book selling to the US book selling? Is it different culturally, or did you figure out that Waterstones and Barnes and Noble are similar enough?
Extremely similar. I think there's far more differences within each country than there is between each country. And it's a big mistake to think that everywhere is the same within the United Kingdom. It's not. London and Grimsby are very, very different places. New York City is a different world apart from, Somewheresville, Alabama.
Yeah, but yeah, when I walk into because one of my things when I'm traveling, I either go into the Waterstones in Dublin, or if I'm up in Manchester, I'm trying to find the Waterstones there. Or when I'm traveling and I go into the Barnes and Nobles, they do look similar, but they are curated differently. There's no question. There's different things in the front of the stores. But do you give a mandate at the corporate level, or do you just say to the bookseller in that specific area, have at it, put whatever you want in the front of the store?
No, we give a very, very strict instruction. Use your common sense and be nice to your customers.
All right, there you go.
That's it.
There you go.
And if you do both of those things, it's probably going to be much better than any more detailed instruction from us.
See, that's why it's working. So this is a gentleman that I'm very close to, and you're going to be selling a lot of his books, I predict. This is my old boss, Lloyd Blankfein.
Oh, yep.
And he said something in here, and I worked for him, and I look up to him. He's a sort of a mentor of mine. But and I don't know if you know him, but you think like him, because his attitude is the person on the front line knows way more than me, behind enemy lines. Let him figure it out, or let he or her figure it out. And I think it's such a good thing for younger people to hear too, because you may be somebody's boss, but at the end of the day, you may be listening to them more than they need to listen to you. There's a service leadership component to what you're saying.
Yeah, plus we're selling books, which means you make mistakes. How much can go wrong with that?
Right. Well,
Maybe a little bit more at stake if you're a trader at Goldman Sachs.
tell me about your taste. Let's go into the James Daunt consumer of books, and you're walking into a bookstore. And so what are you looking for? Are you looking for nonfiction, fiction? Are you looking for coffee table books? What's your taste?
Well, I think that's why I'm very good at letting stores get on with it themselves, because I have a very singular taste myself. And I also know that it is far from universal. You know, my idea of a really snappy night out is to go to the opera.
Right.
So, you know, I should not be the one determining the taste of bookstores. I like literary fiction, and I read a lot of, you know, quite elevated nonfiction. I'm trying still to educate myself in that, to that degree. So I read serious things myself for pleasure. Some of those are just fantastic, and I think they should be universally bestsellers. And I've just read a first novel, The Golden Boy by Patricia Finn. First novel, very funny, absolutely, really, really good novel. And I think that should be a bestseller. But most of what I read is probably rather esoteric. I'm reading a book on the Normans in Sicily in the 12th century at the moment.
That's why a lot of my ancestors have blue eyes, James.
Ah, there we go.
Because of those Normans, you know what I mean? When I go to Sicily, you can really see that cultural kaleidoscope in Sicily. You know, my family's from the southern part of the boot of Italy, but my grandmother used to always say that, that's really where the melting pot, the real true Mediterranean melting pot is what you're talking about, you know.
Absolutely, for sure.
I mean, my friend Dominic Sambrook, who's one of the co-hosts of The Rest is History, he's got a book club podcast coming out. I don't know if you're aware of it, but his whole genre is going to be the older books and Madame Bovary and Wuthering Heights and the impact of Huckleberry Finn on American culture. You know, I've sort of taken the lane of contemporary authors, but, he's a little jealous of me right now. I told him I was going to have you on. He was jealous of me. Your favorite book, if you had to pick one fiction and non-fiction book, because you're the king quintessential bookseller, what do you say to people?
Well, it changes. It depends what's going on in the world. Recently, the book I actually reread, and I just second time round it was stunning. Non-fiction was Savage War of Peace, which is Alistair Horn on the French in Algeria and the unraveling there, and it sort of had a particular sort of resonance there. Fiction-wise, I almost always pick something from the great canon, and my go-to is Madame Bovary, or it's Anna Karenina, or it's one of those. The book that surprised me most recently, literally the book that I've just put down was a Mary Beth Keane novel, which was, again, one of these novelists we hadn't heard from for 10 years or something, called Whale Harbor. Just fantastic. So, the classics are the thing. Middlemarch. I mean, Lord alive, I read that again the other day. Oh my goodness, that's a good book.
Yeah, I mean, I brought up Madame Bovary because I heard you talk about it before, and it's one of my favorites. You know, did you read Lessons in Chemistry?
I did.
Yeah, I love that book, and I think you guys had
really nice.
The book of the year for Barnes and Noble a few years back, and she was another one of my successful cold calls. James, I figured out her email. And I sent her a note. She's living, of course, in London, and we had a great interview. I thought her book was brilliant on so many different levels of American culture at that time, and also the impact of that culture, that Mad Men-esque culture, is still pervasive today. You know, and I thought she really captured it. I really enjoyed it. Okay, so we're at the part of the program. I have 5 words that my producer and I came up with, and just sort of a little bit of a raw shot test. I'm going to say the word, and then you give me a 1 or 2 sentence reaction. Okay, you ready? If I say Daunt books, you think what?
Friendly people, nice people, people who are going to help you.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe these will be similar, but let me try these. I say Waterstones.
Ooh, bigger, It's more inclusive. At Piccadilly with a flagship, really a dramatically big and all-encompassing bookstore.
I love that store. One of the things about that store is when you go up the steps, you can see the indentations in the marble of I just think of all the people, James, that have gone up and down those steps looking for their particular excitement in the bookshelves, every time I'm in London, I make a stop at Hatchards, and then I walk down the block to go to Waterstones just to see what you guys are doing over there. Okay, what about Barnes & Noble? I say the two words Barnes & Noble.
I think Barnes & Noble, moment of triumph is when the school day is over and it fills up with kids. It just has a vibrancy and an excitement to it, and we are bringing books and the enjoyment of books to a new generation every day.
It's interesting because I've written down that when I hear Barnes & Noble, I think growth and excitement, and you use the word excitement because I do feel the buzz. If you go to this Barnes & Noble down by my home here in Manhasset, which is 20 miles outside of New York City, you can feel the buzz at 3:30, Okay, if I say the word reading, you say what?
Yeah, I sort of think of a kid in a corner. I think it's a refuge in many ways. And yes, of course, for the personalities, it's all different things and excitement. But for many people, it's a refuge and a comfort.
Yeah. Well, it certainly is for me. I think most people see me as an extrovert, but I'm actually more introverted than people would think because when I'm home, that's really what I want to do. When I hear the word reading, I think imagination and curiosity. You have an insatiable curiosity. Okay, so the last word, I'm going to give you the last word, James. Books. Say the word books.
I just think of myself. I just think of my life is on the bookshelf. Every stage of my life I can see in the books that are there. And it brings back wonderful memories of friends and moments and stages.
When I think of the word book, it's a phenomenal piece of technology, James. It's the oldest technology. Everything has changed. Our phones have changed. Our computer, the way we look at the TV. I guess the airlines are still going at 500 or 600 miles an hour. But the book is a 500-year-old piece of technology that you think in 500 years it'll be with us, James?
I think so. And I think it's astonishing simply how extraordinarily durable it is and effective it is. And as you say, newspapers, well, we don't read them anymore. It's on your iPad. It's on your phone. Music, it changes, the format changes all the time. Not with books. And I think when publishers also, and they keep on going through a sort of pendulum cycle, but when publishers concentrate on the physical attributes of a book as well, they are lovely things and treasures forever.
Yeah, I think I upset my publisher a little bit. I'm publishing a book in September with Penguin Random House in the UK and Holt in the US, and I was very picky about the cover. I could sense they were getting a little frustrated with me, but that's okay, right? Yeah.
That is 100% okay. You should be picky about the quality of the paper as well, and the font, and the stitching, and everything.
I'm going to tell him my new friend James Dawn said it was okay. I have some license to push them around a little bit. I thought that the font selection was great. I thought also the way they did the bolding throughout the book was great. I wasn't in love with the cover because I wanted something. I feel like these covers, if you don't mind me saying so, I would love to get your reaction before I let you go. I feel like we go through the genres of covers. We get these different colors. You go into the fiction area. Every book is a little bit the same. They're going to be mad at me for saying this, but I feel like, I'm going to call it lazy, but it's repetitive. I wanted something a little bolder, a little fresher. So.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of luck in it as well, because it goes again in trends, but of course they're determining their cover sort of 6-9 months before the book comes out. And then they think, well, I'm going to have pink because everything's blue. And then everybody does it and then everything's pink.
Right, exactly.
So there is a little bit of that, but great book designers are highly distinctive, and a great book design should always be aspired to, because lots and lots of people choose a book and judge it by its cover.
I was just going to say that despite the cliche, don't judge a book by its cover. Guess what we all do, James? we judge the book by its cover. If it's a fresh looking cover, we're like, oh, okay, I'll open that. I'll pick that up. So it really does matter. Well, you've been delightful today. I really appreciate you joining me on the show. And maybe if you don't mind, maybe we'll get you back. I'll have you come back.
A pleasure. We can celebrate your book.
We'll have you come back once a year. You'll give us a rendition of what you're reading and thinking about. But I really do appreciate